Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for GW23, and you can see the top 10 captains on screen. Jarrod Bowen is 10th, facing Sunderland at home, and Bruno Fernandes, after a great return against Man City, is up against the league leaders in Arsenal. Phil Foden, Ekitike and Palmer just miss out on the top 5, which comprise of Bukayo Saka, who played the full 90 against Inter Milan in a 3-1 win for the Gunners. Ray and Cherky, Igor Thiago, Semenyo, and Erling Haaland complete the top 5, and you could certainly argue there are opportunities to go against Haaland even when he's facing bottom of the league Wolves at home. He has 1 goal in the last 8 games across all competitions, and that was a penalty, and Man City lost to Bodo Glimt 3-1 on Tuesday night and the Manchester Derby last Saturday, but you'd still back them to get back to winning ways, of course, and let's see if they can get the job done in GW23. I have to say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped the channel grow. We hit 38k subscribers today, so that's very much appreciated, and there are new goals on the horizon like 39,000 and then 40k, which is the next big objective in 2026. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, fair access to my videos, proud to comments, amongst my other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Let's get this video in particular to over 100 likes and closing in on those new objectives. Subscribe to the channel, and this is going to be a double upload for FPL to celebrate another milestone. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My squad value is 100.5 million with 1.8 in the bank, but the spending power is 100.9 million, and that can be found on websites like FPL.team. I'd highly recommend you check it out and visualize future game weeks, and you can see when is the best time to wildcard because every situation is different. My recommendation for most people is saving it for around game week 30 and that sort of period because we'll get more doubles and blanks, but game week 26 could be a double for the likes of Arsenal, which I discussed in my recent deadline stream, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and all the updates will be provided on this channel. The same goes for injuries. We've got a few updates from the Friday press conferences, which I'll talk about in certain positions, and I'll talk about alternatives as we go along, just in case you have even more money at your disposal. And for those of you who can't afford this exact 50-man squad, I'll talk about some compromises that can still leave you competitive and chasing those green arrows. There are 3 standout goalkeepers in FPL this season. Jordan Pickford leads the way with 100, but Robin Roofs is second with 97, and he's also significantly cheaper, which offers you great value in the heart of that Sunderland defence. They've got some mixed fixtures coming up, a few promising ones on paper, like West Ham away, but also some really tricky tests where you wouldn't expect them to keep a clean sheet, but they have surprised a lot of people this season. Even away from home, they can keep the opposition team to a goalless draw and get some crucial points on the road, but they're even more impressive at the Stadium of Light, where they remain unbeaten in this Premier League campaign. They got a 0-0 draw against Man City not too long ago. So Robin Roofs does make it into this squad, but if you are going for a cheap Sunderland defender, I wouldn't double up on their defensive line week in, week out. That would just be starting Roofs and having the likes of Alderete, Mukiele, or any Sunderland defender on your bench. But the backup is Martin Dubravka. I know you can invest in a sort of rotating goalkeeper pair and go for Kelleher and Verbruggen. Even Robert Sanchez would be very appealing with Chelsea's upcoming fixtures, but I think Roofs can be your starting goalkeeper in virtually most game weeks this season, with Dubravka starting on the odd occasion, but you don't need to spend too much money in this position because it's more important to spend that on the outfield areas, and that's where you'll get many more points, particularly in the midfield and forward line. But the defence remains very important, and just like with the goalkeepers, ideally you wouldn't spend too many transfers in this area because I don't think the gains will be as profitable. I am going for a slightly different structure and spending more money in this area, and some people might disagree with that, and we can definitely talk about some alternatives in the deadline stream tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled for that too. But James Tarkowski is facing Leeds at home next, and Everton have solid fixtures on paper. This is also a nice way of covering that Toffees defence without having Jordan Pickford in goal, but that is still another option for you. I just wouldn't double up on Everton and spend over 10 million on Tarkowski and Jordan Pickford at the same time. Michael Keane would be my preference, but he's still suspended. He'll return in game week 24, and that will be a massive boost there for Everton. But I'm also going to go for Chalobah because Chelsea are top of the FDR, the fixture difficulty rating, until game week 27, and I think it's worth having a Robert Sanchez in goal, maybe Reece James or Chalobah. When it comes to safety and security though, Chalobah's more likely to start week in, week out, whilst James can be rotated with gusto, and sometimes he'll play in the midfield and be given a rest here and there. So with James, you can get some massive returns, but also some frustrating 0 or 1 pointers, which leave you in a precarious situation in Fantasy Premier League, but that won't be the case for Gabriel Magalhaes, who has 120 FPL points this season, and since returning from injury, he has returned in every single match so far, and he boasts by far the highest points per game amongst defenders, and Chalobah is the closest to him in second place, but Jurrien Timber makes up the podium, and I would consider an Arsenal defensive double-up, particularly in the starting 11, but going into Gameweek 23, would you start Timber and Gabriel against Manchester United? Let me know your thoughts down the comment section below, but that would look far more appealing against the likes of Leeds away, and Arsenal have some solid fixtures over the next 5 where 1 or 2 clean sheets is certainly doable. They might even keep more than that throughout that time period. But the last defender is a cheap option at 4.1 million. Alderete completes the spine, and I wouldn't start him essentially. He would be the second or third option on your bench, and that provides decent enough cover just in case you get hit by injuries or suspensions. And in that scenario, you might even consider starting Dubravka when he has a plum fixture and diversifying your defense that way if you're not too keen on doubling up on that Black Cats defense. But I do like the mixture that you've got here. You could argue too much money is spent in this position because you've got 4 players at 5.5 million or above. And I'll talk about a few ways you can maybe find a bit more money from this area and spread it around to the midfield and forward line, which is where the majority of the big hauls and point scoring will be at. After Newcastle's Champions League victory, Eddie Howe provided this update on Bruno Guimaraes. It's an ankle problem, a little bit of swelling in his ankle. We hope it's not serious, difficult to know. I think Bruno's the type of player that never wants to come off, so the fact that he has come off is a worry for us. And he provided another update on Friday morning, and he said, "We hope it is not serious. The extent of the injury is still unknown." He was reasonably positive after the game. He is the guy that will never rule anything out. We are going to give him every chance for this weekend. We'll try and make the right decision with Bruno. He is a pivotal player. So that is a key update on Bruno Guimaraes. I think he will start against Aston Villa, and whilst I couldn't guarantee it to you, I think he is one of the best FPL midfielders, and he could be benched in such an occasion. And maybe you start Jurrien Timber and all these 4 defenders you see on screen that I talked about earlier, and that's where the squad depth can come in very handy. But Guimaraes will certainly be available very soon, and I'd be surprised if he missed several matches, which is where the yellow flag would become a major concern. I would also go for another Bruno in Fernandes, who has been excellent since returning from injury with an assist against Burnley and also another one against Manchester City, getting some bonus points in the process. He costs 9.2 million now in FPL, and recently Bruno Guimaraes went up in price too, so both of them are gaining a lot of traction, and there's good reason for that. When building the midfield, these two have been highlighted in multiple best wildcard squads and transits videos, and there's good reason for that. They make for perfect acquisitions in the midfield. They offer consistency, even DEFCON potential. Bruno Fernandes is on penalties, and both of them can score plenty and get some assists in the process. But Fernandes will be even more consistent when it comes to goal contributions, and I back him to get plenty of goals and assists from now until the end of the season. The same goes for Declan Rice, but maybe not to the same level, of course. But Arsenal are worth doubling or tripling up on, and the standout options are Gabriel and Rice. There are no two ways about that. Bukayo Saka will have his moments, and Jurrien Timber will be a solid choice in that defensive line. David Raya will also be a safe pair of hands between the sticks, but I think with the other Arsenal choices, I'd probably avoid them at this moment in time. Trossard and Martinelli can rotate. Trossard is probably the other option I'd be considering if you want a major differential, but even then, it's worth going for the consistency of Declan Rice, who starts virtually every single game, and he will be suspended for matchday 8 in the Champions League against Kara Almaty. He was never going to play that match anyway, so he can get a rest there and start against Man United and Leeds away coming up next. Another player that I'd be very keen on is Antoine Semenyo, who is second in the point scoring charts amongst midfielders, and in fact these 4 make up the top 4, and they are definitely worth including in your FPL setup. Harry Wilson is 5th, you've got Morgan Rogers in 6th as well, whilst Phil Foden has fallen down to 7th, and they're all worth considering, although I'm probably more keen on selling Foden at this moment in time, and Bukayo Saka is 8th. But the next option is Enzo Fernandez, who just about makes it into the top 10, and he now costs 6.6 million in FPL. He went up in price overnight, and I think Chelsea are worth covering offensively. If you have enough money, Cole Palmer could certainly be a consideration, and I think he will be available this weekend against Crystal Palace away. But Enzo will offer even better value, and his stats are incredible. The XGI, which is expected goal involvements, combining XG and XA, is over 11, which is incredible for a mid-price midfielder, and he played the full 90 against Paphos in the Champions League after suffering from illness in the previous game week. So I think this midfield offers you a lot of routes to points, great value for the most part. Even Bruno Fernandes, who is the most expensive, is definitely capable of returning like a 10 or 11 million midfielder, and he has done that very consistently over the past couple of years. It's now time to complete the forward line. There will be one budget option to facilitate the other two, but if you have even more money at your disposal, this is where you could have a very stacked squad and 8 really competent attackers, and you'll have a lot of benching headaches in the future. Whilst for others who are struggling for funds, you might just have that sort of set and forget bench option, and that will make it a bit more accessible and maybe easier and lighter when it comes to team selection headaches and your lineups. Before Brentford's game against Chelsea, I highlighted Igor Thiago's terrible fixtures on paper. He had 5 goals in the last 2 matches before GW23, but facing the likes of Chelsea away, which just went by, Aston Villa away, Newcastle away, and Arsenal at home over the next 4. That looks diabolical, but Brentford have had a very good season so far. They're very promising, and Keith Andrews is doing a brilliant job with all the changes that have been going around and selling key players, losing their long-time manager in Thomas Frank. A lot of people had fears for Brentford, including myself, but Igor Thiago has really stepped up with 16 Premier League goals, breaking the all-time record for most goals scored in a single season by a Brazilian player in the Premier League. And he is second when it comes to FPL points amongst forwards. He is the closest to Erling Haaland, who does make it despite his terrible form. I would back him to just start scoring again. And he is still the best goal scorer in the Premier League by some distance. He's right up there in Europe with Kylian Mbappe and Harry Kane, and these two are the standout forwards for a reason. The likes of Jared Bowen, Joao Pedro are fairly consistent, especially Bowen, but they can still be quite frustrating from time to time, and I think more of us expected a little bit more in terms of the high ceiling, and no one has reached 100 FPL points amongst forwards except for Igor Thiago and Erling Haaland, which is very telling. Dominic Calvert-Lewin offers brilliant value. If you have enough money, I will suggest him as your budget forward. And for those who maybe are struggling for funds a little bit more, one of Mane or Krupi Jr. would be the standout options. But in my case, I'm very limited when it comes to the funds. And that's why Barnes at 4.2 million completes his 50-man squad. But you can make a downgrade elsewhere, particularly with the defensive line, if you are quite concerned about the third forward not really cutting it. Even Mane or Krupi Jr. would be significantly better than Barnes or these 4.2 million forwards, that's for sure. Mark Gue is another choice, but you would block yourself from that triple up in Chelsea, which you might want through Robert Sanchez in goal or Cole Palmer in the midfield. Even Joao Pedro, as I highlighted earlier, will have his moments, but he's a very streaky player, and you could argue he is fairly inconsistent, to be fair, despite what I said earlier. Let's now head over to FPL.team, where I'll show you the starting 11 and talk about the captaincy, referencing the top 10 list from the beginning of this video. And I think it's very important to visualize future game weeks using these websites, so you've got a good idea of how to use the wildcard and also your other chips, like the bench boost, free hit, and triple captain. There won't be much goalkeeper rotation going on here, with Robin Ruff starting against West Ham away over Dubravka, who faces Tottenham at home. Tarkowski, Gabriel and Chalobah forms part of a decent defensive line, and Jurrien Timber could also be a starter, and you might even want to go for a back four. This auto sub could even take place if Bruno Guimaraes does miss out against Aston Villa, but I don't think that'll be the case, and I would favour the Newcastle midfielder if possible. Bruno Fernandes against Arsenal away would cause a clash, especially if you have Jurrien Timber in your starting 11. Declan Rice is up against Man United at home, with Semenyo and Haaland facing Wolves at home. You've got a Chelsea double up with Enzo Fernandez, and I think he's going to be a great option for the next couple of weeks. Igor Thiago is yet another captaincy contender. It's between the two City players and Igor Thiago when it comes to the podium, as highlighted at the beginning of this video. So I wouldn't mind going for Thiago as a captaincy punt, even over Erling Haaland, because rotation is possible. I wouldn't fully rule out Marmoush starting against Wolves and Haaland getting a much needed rest. So on the bench, there is Dubravka, Timber, Alderete and Barnes. And if you have enough money, I would certainly upgrade this to at least Krupi Jr. or Mane. And I think Krupi Jr. would be a slight preference of mine. And in terms of other things you could do, probably downgrading one of your defenders is going to be on the cards. And that could also allow you to spend more money in maybe another position like your third forward. And that's where you can go for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who would be even more consistent and reliable than Mane, Krupi Jr. or those 4.2 million strikers who will not even feature. And I think with the midfield, I'm quite happy with this setup, but Declan Rice will be my Arsenal midfielder of choice. Bukayo Saka can still be considered, but at that sort of price point, I just go to Cole Palmer, who has better fixtures over the next 5, and he's a bit more nailed on, I would dare to say, but his injury problems have been quite prominent all season. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you have even more money at your disposal? Which upgrades would you make with those funds? And for those who are struggling to afford this 50-man squad, what would you downgrade to really bolster these positions? And maybe you have a few qualms about this in terms of certain preferences like Pickford over Roofs. You might even want to go for Bruno Guimaraes out because of the yellow flag, another forward over Igor Thiago. But I have to say, against Nottingham Forest at home, I would back Brentford and Thiago to do very well in this fixture. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Let's get this video in particular to over 100 likes and closing on new goals like 39k subscribers on YouTube. Follow me on my social media platforms, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the GW23 deadline stream, and stay tuned for more FPL and UCL Fantasy content.